The following episode will contain spoilers. You have been warned.
You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? In combat, photographers shoot things too. Unfortunately, those things can shoot back. Making is a pretty difficult job, something Amber and Scott discuss after watching Lee. Now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do?
Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Now it's your turn.
Well, I suppose if a picture's worth 1,000 words, we just went through a few novels.
That's true. This episode, we're talking about Lee. It is about it's actually a portrayal of a pivotal decade in the life of American war correspondent and photographer Lee Miller. Miller's singular talent and unbridled tenacity resulted in some of the 20th century's most indelible images of war.
The craziness is that a lot of this stuff didn't even get out until after she was dead.
Yeah, this was an interesting film of a woman who initially was a model and then turned photographer during the 40s and a time where women were still kept in their place. Women weren't allowed. Women weren't able to do this or that. And as our story progresses, we see that she wants to cover the war and she's not allowed to because women aren't allowed to.
Yeah, that was the times there. Yeah, hell, I remember when women weren't allowed in combat zones.
So,
and I don't go back to the 40s.
Right. So eventually Lee finds a workaround to go through American government instead of British government. And she does find a way to get out amongst the troops to cover the war. But then they have their first press briefing and women not allowed. So she keeps...
No women allowed.
Yes, for those who might not understand that reference, I know that says Snoopy and no dogs allowed. So we see her pushing and pushing, trying to be able to cover the war. And ultimately, she is successful. She is a strong, tenacious woman, and she is able to get the access she needs to have the ability to be on the front line, to ultimately even have access to Hitler's house once Hitler had died and the troops were in there going through things.
Yeah. Chickie found a way to get naked in Hitler's tub.
Yes, one of her iconic pictures was her definitely going in Hitler's bathtub and having a photo of him in the background and her naked in the bathtub. So, yes, a very unique personality, very, very progressive for more conservative times.
Headstrong AF.
Absolutely. So, what would you do? What would you do? So that's what we do here is what would you do?
Really? I didn't know that. Holy shit. Someone just explained the concepts of my show to me. That's amazing. Okay, please continue.
Yes. So if I were in Lee's shoes of that time period, when she was covering the war, she actually was doing it for Vogue, which obviously seems incredibly out of sync for war coverage. But she had dealt with a very progressive editor over at Vogue and who helped her throughout the process to get the access and to be able to do the photographs and share what she was seeing out there. I think I am very Lee-like at my core. I think if I had been at a time where someone said I couldn't, I'd definitely try and find a way to do something. That said, I don't know if I'd be fighting to get to the front in a war. I think I would not be doing that.
Well, you're definitely headstrong AF, just like her, so.
Yeah. I think first of all, if someone's going to tell you you can't because you're a woman, F you. And sadly, that actually still happens, not nearly to the degree it used to, but you and I were even talking recently about jobs, and I had shared with you once upon a time I had applied for a job, and this wasn't that long ago. I'd say it was maybe late 90s, and I didn't get a job, and I was more than qualified for it, and I asked the guy why not, and he said, well, I wanted to give it to a guy who had a family to support.
No chicks allowed.
Yeah. So definitely.
Actually, that wasn't even about chicks. We had that conversation. That was more about you not having a family or a what he saw as a family, the traditional, I have a spouse, I have Rugrats.
Well, and quite frankly, even if I had had a spouse and I had had Rugrats, I think he definitely wanted to prop up the man of the house to provide for the family and, less so the woman, even if the situation had been similar. So I definitely am someone who would push back against any sort of limitations, barriers, walls when it comes to women. And, I'm equally appalled at ageism. That said, when it comes to actual war is scary and dangerous and deadly. And I don't know if there's any situation where I would ever be put myself in danger like that.
Well, that's not a man-woman thing. That's I don't want to go and get myself killed or put myself that close to death because I don't.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it is a man-woman thing. We're just talking about the character.
Yeah,
here.
I've never quite gotten this. So I too don't believe that I have the chops to be a war journalist, or maybe it's the intelligence to not be one. I don't know, because I do understand the concept that we have one life and it can end in a myriad of ways. I believe there were even movies listing 1,000 at a time. And I think I'd rather not aid that process, putting myself directly in. Now, if I'm younger and I have a gun or I'm actually serving from I'm trying to kill them type perspective.
Well, that's a whole other job.
Yes. And that's not to minimize the role that a war reporter plays, but it is a little different. I mean, they're not trying to kill anyone. They're trying to take pictures. So if they get one-on-one with somebody from the other side, you don't
have the
hey, they're going to shoot each other. I'm going to use my camera. You're going to use your gun. I'm going to be dead.
Well, as you know, and our audience does not know, I used to be a reporter and a TV reporter, and there were times that definitely I had to put myself in situations. But let me tell you, I never put myself in danger because you just don't know when something could go astray, whether you're on a ride along with a police officer or on a fire truck with a bunch of firefighters.
Hashtag moose fight.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Two mooses or mises. Is it mooses or mises? It's mooses.
Yeah.
If two mooses are fighting, that could get rough.
I don't know why you went to do moose fighting.
Well, I know where you were a reporter.
Okay. Well, yes, we didn't cover moose fights.
And I watched Northern Exposure, okay?
That's okay. That's a fun fact. But I'm definitely one for getting the truth out there. I have been an activist in the past. I have, marched for things that I believe in. I have protested about things. I have circulated petitions.
Your inner Britta.
I have called, legislators. I definitely have that, the truth needs to be shared part of my personality. But I think I have a strong sense of self-preservation.
Yes.
And I am not, I don't know if it's brave or reckless or maybe a combination of a lot of things to have done what Lee did.
Yeah. Question: are you ready to die? Answer: no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So, and then I guess the other part of this story to explore is that Lee never really talked about her experiences in the war. She had seen the absolute atrocities of piles of bodies and, boxcars full of people who had died and piles of just human beings treated with such indignity. And in the movie, her son finds these photos after she's passed away, which also is what happened in real life. And she didn't talk about her time in the war and what she had done with her child. And that's interesting to me because on one hand, it's such a huge part of who you are at that point. What you've seen, you can't unsee. You can't pull back on the emotions and memories that must haunt you in a different way from serving in a war, but still a very powerful way of how that affects you and your life going forward. And to not have your children understand maybe that's why you are how you are.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I am the son of a guy who was in the Air Force, and he served in Iraq. And I mean, he wasn't in combat. He was more refueling Bob Hope's plane. Fun fact, he actually refueled Bob Hope's plane for a thing out there. But still, I mean, you're still in that war zone where like they don't want you there. The other side doesn't want you there. They want to kill you and get rid of you. And when you're in that situation, that's going to F with your brain a little bit. Like, yeah, no, I can see where that would completely mess somebody up. And yeah, I'd rather not get messed up in that way.
It's an interesting thought and situation to be in, and one that so many of people who have served in military or even been media, such as Lee, in being put in these unfathomable situations. And how do you compartmentalize that and still function through life? Because any of the things that any of those folks have seen is enough to just throw you for a lifelong loop.
Yeah, I feel like I could, but the God's honest truth is you don't really know until you've been there. Like, until you really get faced with that situation and having to live with the things you've seen, because she saw a lot of bodies. She saw a lot of bodies in some really bad situations. And again, I feel like I could compartmentalize that and be able to move on and without any real trauma, but also I might not.
Triggers are powerful when it comes to memories too. I mean, the smell of something. It's not always just the sight of a memory. You can smell something. You can hear something. And those are such powerful triggers to take you back to something. So even if you manage to push something down, it can resurface so easily by external factors.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I don't really have anything that's been ridiculously traumatic from my past. I mean, obviously, I've been on this planet a while. I have some traumatic experiences, but nothing like what people who have quote unquote real traumatic experiences have to deal with. So it's difficult for me to say. I feel like I'm mentally strong, but it's easy to feel like you're mentally strong when you haven't really had to deal with that.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know until you've actually been tested.
So, yeah. But yeah, I think I'm mostly, God bless her. Thank you for your service. I don't want your job.
Yeah, me neither.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.